fascinating look at the National Intelligence Council's Global Trends 2025. Today, we're going to dive deeper into the rest of the series, the Global Trends series. These reports may be from a while back, but their insights are still remarkably relevant. We'll discuss each report in order, highlighting the key takeaways that will give us a comprehensive picture of the world ahead. I'm excited to see what you think about these fascinating forecasts. So, get ready. Let's immerse ourselves in these insights and enjoy the journey together. And as always, stay safe.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some pretty dense material today. We're looking at the National Intelligence Council's Global Trends reports.
Yeah, these things are fascinating.
Specifically, their reports from 2025, 2030, and 2040.
A lot of really interesting stuff in there.
Definitely. We're going to be going through them chronologically.
Yeah, that seems like the best way to do it.
And we're really going to be focusing on those key insights and data points that I think are the most valuable for us.
As top geopolitical analysts,
Exactly.
I think it'll be particularly fascinating to see how their predictions have evolved over time.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. And considering like what year each report was published in.
Right.
So starting with Global Trends 2025, that one came out in 2008.
Wow, so right before the global financial crisis.
Exactly. It's really interesting to see what they were thinking right before this massive global event.
And they emphasize this looming shift in global power dynamics. They talk about how the U.S. is going to remain the strongest power, but facing competition from these rising powers like China, India, and Russia.
It's not just a simple transfer of power, though.
Right. It's not just like handing over the baton. It's really this move toward a more multipolar world.
And their demographic projections really highlight this shift, too.
Oh, yeah.
They predicted that by 2025, Asia, Africa, and Latin America would account for almost all population growth over the next 2 decades.
Wow.
Less than 3% occurring in the West.
Huge demographic shift.
Yeah, major implications for, economic growth, political influence, cultural trends even.
It's a reminder that understanding global affairs really requires thinking outside of a U.S.-centric view.
Absolutely.
And they also highlight this increasing urbanization, particularly in the developing world.
Yeah, that's been a huge trend.
And they projected that by 2025, India could have 3 of the world's 10 biggest cities.
Wow.
And 10 of its top 50.
10 of its top 50. That's incredible.
I know, and that level of urbanization, it just puts immense strain on resources, infrastructure, governance.
It's a trend that continues to accelerate, too.
Oh, for
The
right.
2030 report, which came out in 2012, they said the volume of urban construction over the next 40 years could basically equal all urban construction in history up to that point.
Whoa.
Like, we're building a whole new world on top of the old one.
Raises so many questions about sustainability,
For sure.
resource management, the social and political dynamics of these megacities.
It's mind-boggling to think about.
It really is.
But it's not just about demographics and urbanization.
Right.
The 2025 report also talks about the potential for conflict.
Okay.
They identify a few key drivers there.
Like what?
Resource scarcity, growing energy demands, and the potential for conflict over water resources.
Interesting.
They even talk about possible conflict in the Arctic.
As the ice melts.
Exactly. Opens up new shipping routes and access to resources.
Wow. And they identify climate change as a major force shaping geopolitics pretty early on.
Yeah, they were ahead of the curve on that one.
They predicted it would exacerbate existing tensions, especially in regions that are already struggling with water scarcity, food security, political instability.
It's like a threat multiplier, making everything worse.
And they tie this environmental stress to the rise of non-state actors, too. They point out how climate change could contribute to instability and create opportunities for terrorist groups, criminal organizations to exploit.
It's all connected.
Yeah, and they highlight the growing influence of technology, too.
Especially the internet and social media.
Right.
In empowering individuals and non-state actors.
And this is 2008, remember?
Yeah, way before the Arab Spring.
And the widespread use of social media for political mobilization.
It's amazing how they anticipated that shift.
It really is.
They talked about how technology could be used for both good and bad.
Of course.
Promoting transparency and empowering citizens.
Right.
But also being used for surveillance and censorship and spreading misinformation.
It's a double-edged sword. It all depends on who's wielding it And for what purpose?
And speaking of technology,
Yeah.
they spend a good chunk of the 2025 report talking about advancements in AI, biotechnology, nanotechnology.
I can only imagine what they were predicting back then.
They saw these technologies as having the potential to revolutionize everything.
Like what?
Healthcare, manufacturing, energy production, warfare.
Warfare.
They even predicted new types of weapons based on these technologies.
That is kind of scary.
Yeah, it raises serious concerns about arms races and the potential for catastrophic conflict.
And it's not just theoretical anymore.
Right.
We're seeing these technologies being developed and deployed today.
Often with little oversight or regulation.
It's a reminder that we need to be having some serious conversations about the ethical implications of these advancements.
Absolutely.
And what safeguards we need to put in place.
Agreed. It really highlights how these interconnected forces of technology and, individual agency, they were really changing the geopolitical landscape.
Right.
And this theme of individual empowerment. It's closely tied to another key trend they highlighted, which is this continued rise of the global middle class.
Okay, they projected that by 2030, the global middle class would expand significantly.
Especially in developing countries.
Like China, India, Brazil.
Yep, exactly.
What implications did they see that having?
Well, they saw it as kind of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
On the one hand,
Yeah.
a growing middle class means increased consumer spending, which can drive economic growth.
Right.
And it also means a larger pool of educated and skilled workers, which can boost innovation and productivity.
But on the other hand?
A rising middle class also means rising expectations.
Yeah.
Demands for better living standards, greater political participation, access to resources.
And that can put pressure on governments to deliver.
For sure.
And potentially lead to instability if those demands aren't met.
Precisely. And they also pointed out how this growth of the middle class would put even more strain on already scarce resources.
Right.
Water, energy, food. And this competition for resources could lead to conflict.
Within and between countries.
Exactly.
And they saw climate change as a threat multiplier in this scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Making resource scarcity worse and making it even harder for governments to meet the needs of their growing populations.
It just adds another layer of complexity.
And they predicted that climate change would lead to increased migration as well.
Oh, yeah.
As people are displaced by rising sea levels, extreme weather events, disruptions to agriculture.
They were already talking about the potential for climate refugees.
Wow.
And the challenges that would pose for border security and international relations.
So many challenges.
And this brings us to another key theme that emerges in the 2030 report.
Okay.
The evolving role of the U.S. in a multipolar world.
Right.
They argued that while the U.S. would remain a major player on the global stage, its relative power would decline.
As other countries continue to rise.
Especially China.
Right.
And they saw this as a natural evolution of the global order.
Not necessarily a bad thing.
Right, not inherently negative.
Okay.
They argued that a more multipolar world could actually be more stable
Really?
in the long run.
How so?
Well, because power would be more diffuse,
Okay.
and no single country would have the ability to dominate.
Interesting.
But they also acknowledged that this transition would be tricky.
Oh, yeah.
Fraught with challenges and the potential for conflict.
Of course.
They highlighted the risk of miscalculation and escalation.
As countries adjust to this new power dynamic.
Right.
And they talked about the need for greater cooperation and diplomacy.
To manage these transitions peacefully.
Yeah, make sure things don't blow up.
Exactly. And this need for cooperation becomes even more crucial.
Why?
When you consider the global challenges they outlined in the 2030 report.
Like what?
Well, basically the same challenges we're still grappling with today.
Climate change,
Yep.
resource scarcity,
Pandemics,
cybersecurity threats.
the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
It's a pretty sobering reminder that despite all our technological advancements and economic progress,
Yeah.
we're still facing some pretty fundamental existential threats.
It's humbling.
It is.
And this brings us to the final report in the series,
Global Trends 2040,
published in 2021.
in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, the pandemic really casts a long shadow over this report.
It must have shaped their analysis and projections pretty significantly.
Absolutely. They argue that the pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in global systems and accelerated trends that were already underway, the shift towards a more digital and automated economy, the rise of populism and nationalism.
And growing distrust in institutions.
Exactly. It's fascinating how they frame the pandemic not just as a crisis, but as a catalyst for change.
Potentially accelerating both positive and negative trends.
Right? It's like a fork in the road.
Did they offer any specific recommendations for how to navigate this?
They didn't provide like a prescriptive roadmap, but they did highlight several key areas for action.
Like?
Probably strengthening global health security, investing in education and training to prepare workers for the jobs of the future, addressing the root causes of inequality and instability.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
And they also emphasize the importance of international cooperation and multilateralism.
Because
they argue that global challenges require global solutions.
Makes sense.
And this brings us to those three scenarios they outline for how the future might unfold.
Islands, orbits, and communities.
Yep.
And these aren't predictions, right?
No, they're more like thought experiments. Designed to explore different possibilities and help us prepare for a range of potential futures.
Let's start with islands.
Which
is characterized by rising nationalism, protectionism, a retreat from globalization.
Right, a kind of turning inward.
What are the key drivers of this scenario?
Well, they identified several factors that could push us towards an islands world. A backlash against globalization, growing economic inequality, a loss of faith in democratic institutions. And they also pointed to the potential for pandemics and climate change to make things even worse.
How so?
By creating scarcity, disrupting supply chains, fueling social unrest.
And in this island scenario, countries become more inward-looking.
Yep, prioritizing their own interests over global cooperation.
Borders become harder to cross, trade barriers go up, international institutions lose influence.
Exactly. It's a world where countries focus on self-sufficiency and security.
Often at the expense of others?
Right. They compete for resources, hoard vaccines, retreat into regional blocs.
It's a pretty bleak vision of the future.
It is, marked by conflict, instability, and a decline in global prosperity.
A rather dystopian future.
To say the least.
What about the orbits scenario? How does that one play out?
Orbits is characterized by increasing fragmentation and regionalization, with power shifting away from the traditional centers of influence, regional blocs and coalitions.
So it's still a multipolar world.
Yes.
But with a different configuration of power.
Precisely. In this scenario, regional powers like China, India, and the European Union exert greater influence, often competing with each other.
For resources, markets, technological dominance.
Yeah, they envisioned a world where countries gravitate towards regional spheres of influence.
Forming alliances based on shared interests or geographic proximity.
Exactly.
So cooperation and competition coexist.
Right.
Countries working together on some issues while vying for dominance on others.
It's a more complex and fluid landscape.
With a greater potential for both conflict and cooperation.
Exactly.
So a more nuanced and perhaps more realistic scenario than the stark divisions of islands.
Possibly.
What about communities? Is that the more optimistic scenario?
Communities is definitely the most optimistic of the three.
Okay.
It emphasizes the potential for bottom-up solutions to global challenges.
Driven by?
Empowered individuals, networks, and non-state actors.
So it's a world where power is more dispersed and decentralized?
Yeah. Exactly. In this scenario, technology empowers individuals and communities to connect with each other.
To share information and organize around shared interests.
Right.
And they saw this as a positive force.
Yeah.
Potentially leading to more innovative and effective solutions to global challenges.
As well as greater transparency and accountability.
Okay, so in a community's world,
solutions to problems like climate change, poverty, pandemics, they would emerge not from top-down government directives, the collective efforts of citizens, businesses, NGOs, and other non-state actors.
It's a vision of a more participatory and collaborative future.
For sure.
One where power is more fluid and less hierarchical.
It's certainly a more hopeful scenario than the other two.
But I imagine it also presents its own set of challenges.
Absolutely. They acknowledge that a community's world would be more complex and less predictable. A greater potential for fragmentation and conflict between different groups and interests.
Right.
They also pointed out the risk of powerful non-state actors.
Like corporations or tech giants.
Accumulating too much influence and undermining democratic institutions.
So it's not a utopia by any means,
No.
but it does offer a more optimistic vision of the future.
Yeah.
One where we harness the power of technology and collective action to address our shared challenges.
I think that's the key takeaway.
So we've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive really getting into these global trends reports.
Yeah, some pretty heavy stuff.
Really fascinating though, right?
Absolutely. It really gets you thinking.
I mean, these reports from the National Intelligence Council, they don't pull any punches.
No, they don't.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Shifting global power, the rise of megacities, potential conflicts over resources, the impact of tech like AI,
And of course, those scenarios they laid out.
islands, orbits, communities.
Right. Thought-provoking stuff.
Definitely makes you wonder what the future holds.
But now let's bring it all home.
Yeah, let's connect it to the work we do as geopolitical analysts.
What do these insights mean for us?
As experts in this field.
One thing that really stuck out to me
Mm.
is how these reports emphasize the growing complexity of the geopolitical landscape.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not a simple world anymore,
None at all.
like the days of a unipolar world, with one superpower calling the shots.
Yeah, those days are fading.
We're moving towards a multipolar world,
With power more spread out,
multiple centers of influence.
both state and non-state actors.
Right, so our analysis needs to be much more nuanced.
And multidimensional.
We can't just focus on the traditional power dynamics between states.
It's bigger than that now.
We need to factor in those non-state actors, the impact of tech, those interconnected challenges like climate change.
And pandemics.
Exactly, it's all connected.
This complexity demands a broader skill set from us as analysts.
For sure.
We need to be fluent in multiple disciplines.
Like what?
Economics, political science, data analysis, even psychology.
Psychology.
Understanding how people make decisions.
Right, it all factors in.
And the reports highlight the importance of data analysis and modeling to understand these complex systems.
So it's not enough to just gather and interpret data.
Right.
We need to be able to develop predictive models
In simulations.
to anticipate what's coming next,
And assess the potential consequences of different policy choices.
which requires a deep understanding of those drivers of change.
The interconnections between systems.
The potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah, those pesky unintended consequences.
Always popping up.
And the reports also stress the need for analysts who are comfortable with uncertainty.
Ambiguity.
The future is not a straight line from the present.
It's messy, it's unpredictable.
Shaped by so many factors.
So we need to be able to develop multiple scenarios
Assess probabilities.
and adapt our analysis as new information emerges.
It's about being agile
Flexible.
and comfortable with not having all the answers.
Because let's face it, we never will.
And this brings us to another crucial point.
Communication.
Yes, in a world of increasing complexity and uncertainty.
We as analysts need to be able to communicate our findings.
Clearly and concisely.
True policymakers and the public.
We need to cut through the noise
Distill complex information into actionable insights.
and present those insights in a way that's both compelling and persuasive.
It's about being storytellers
Using data and analysis to create narratives
that help people understand the challenges.
and the choices we have.
And that storytelling aspect is especially important.
When it comes to those what-if scenarios.
Right? Islands, orbits, communities.
We can use those scenarios to help people understand the potential consequences of different policy choices.
And to prepare for a range of possible futures.
It's about raising awareness, fostering dialogue,
Encouraging strategic thinking.
and it's also about highlighting the agency we have.
And shaping the future.
These reports make it clear that the future is not set in stone.
It's shaped by the choices we make today.
So as geopolitical analysts, we have a responsibility,
Not just to analyze the trends
but also to help shape those trends.
in a positive direction.
It's about using our expertise,
To inform policy decisions, educate the public.
advocate for solutions that promote peace, security, sustainable development.
And recognizing that our role goes beyond just providing information.
It's about being active participants in the global conversation
Using our voices to shape the narrative.
and to inspire action.
And in a world facing such complex challenges,
That role is more important than ever.
it's challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
I think these global trends reports give us the tools and insights we need
To navigate this complex landscape,
and to contribute to a better future.
they remind us that we're not just observers.
We're makers of history.
And that's a responsibility we should all take seriously.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
We've covered a lot.
I hope you found it as insightful as we have.
These reports are dense, but they're packed with valuable information.
We encourage you to dig deeper into them.
continue these conversations.
The future is uncertain.
But it's also full of potential.
Let's use these insights to navigate the challenges
And build a better world.
for ourselves and generations to come.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, this has been The Deep Dive.